All right, 97.7 Outlaw Radio FM listeners, we have a special afternoon broadcast right here, right now. This one actually makes me really happy because it's actually an individual that's trying her absolute hardest to make our community in Leeds and Grenville and the Thousand Islands a much better place. We have Green Party candidate that's running right now for the 2022 election. We got Fiona Jager right here of the Green Party live on the line. How are you doing How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
You are most certainly welcome. I gotta say, first and foremost, I love what the Green Party has always done. Me personally, I've always loved what you guys have done. You guys have always fought for what is right, in my personal opinion. So I really hope that you actually get into office and actually clean up our community.
Thank you. That's why I'm involved with the Green Party, too. I'm not a career politician. This is the first time I've run for office, but it's because the Green Party platform really resonated with me that I wanted to run for them. So I'm just another, ordinary person that just wants to do their best to see change in our community.
And speaking of that, of you actually originally deciding to join, I know you just briefly spoke on that, but what really made you decide to take that leap? Because of course, a decision like this doesn't really come overnight to really run into politics. Like, what really made you decide to stand up and be like, you know what, I need to join the Green Party?
Yeah, no, really good question. So there was a couple of things going on. One was I'm a nurse, but I've been teaching nursing this year. So I've been teaching my students how to be great nurses and what they needed to do to really engage in the sort of excellent practice that I want them to engage in and they want to engage in. And I had to at the same time tell them, if you want to do the job of a really good nurse, you're going to not just have to do the job, you're going to have to advocate for yourself, because currently the health system is not set up to support you in doing your work the way that I'm teaching you to do your work. So telling them to advocate kind of put this spark in me, like, well, maybe I should be doing something to try to affect this change too. Second, I am a mom of 3 kids, and I found myself saying to my kids over and over again, you're going to grow up in a world that's different than the world that I've grown up in. You're going to have to make different choices about buying a house and buying a car than I've made, because you're going to live in a different world, and I hope you're ready for it. We really need your generation to bring about change, because the world can't keep going in the direction it's going. Again, then I had to say to myself, maybe I should actually think about being sort of part of this change, myself seeing what I can do before they're adults. And then, thinking, I'd always been sympathetic to the Green Party and just sort of had it in the back of my mind, like maybe this is something I could get more involved in the kind of coming election, get involved in a campaign. And my partner actually sent me the nomination papers saying, well, why don't you put your name forward? And I was reluctant at first, but with some encouragement from my family and from my community and from the Green Party, decided to just go for it. And here I am. I'm now the candidate.
And I have to ask as well, because obviously, because I never knew that, like, anybody could just kind of put their name in to actually join office. I never knew that. Like, was it a very hard process to actually get going and become a candidate, or was it just kind of like, hey, I want to do it, and then they give you papers, and then voila?
So I was intimidated by it at first. So when I got the nomination package, my first instinct was to say, oh no, this is not for me. Because it seemed like I needed to have a chief financial officer and a campaign manager and sort of all this proof of my connections with the community and signatures of friends or community members who would support me, and it seemed a bit overwhelming. However, when I talked to the people from the Green Party who sort of were, it was like a conversation, where they were trying to figure out who would be the best candidate at the same time as I was trying to figure out if I would be the best person to run. And they really walked me through it. So I would definitely say anybody can be a candidate. Like, all my colleagues in this election, so other Green Party members, are teachers, high school and elementary school teachers, artists, school bus drivers. So we absolutely need ordinary people in office. And if you find the nomination process intimidating, there's always somebody to give you a hand. It's not as difficult as it seems from the outside, and it's been eye-opening for me that really, we just need more people who just want to be actively involved in our democracy.
And of course, I know you mentioned a few moments ago how you are a registered nurse. And the one thing I have to ask, because I do know some individuals, they understand what what nurses like yourself had to go through these past couple of years with the pandemic. But if you don't mind me asking, like, what was it like just being on the front lines of the Canadian, or I should say Ontario healthcare system during the pandemic? Because I've heard some unfortunate horror stories that what you guys really had to go through.
Yeah, well, first of all, I got to give it a caveat and say I work in mental health. I have for a decade, and so even though I was doing frontline work over the course of the pandemic, it was in the mental health field. So I wasn't out actually taking care and serving patients who were coming into the hospital with COVID infections primarily. It actually took a long time, and we had a lot more knowledge about how to protect ourselves from COVID by the time we were seeing COVID patients in mental health units. Like, it was basically people with mental health issues who happened to have COVID at the same time. But that said, a lot of my colleagues are nurses, right? So I would hear a lot about what was going on, and even in this past year, hearing from my students. So I would say it's less. I think nurses really stood up. They wanted to do their best. They wanted to care for patients with COVID. I heard nurses that were tired. I heard nurses that were working long shifts, but nobody that said, I don't want to do this important work. In fact, I think people felt really glad that they were able to be doing this really important job for our whole society, which is take care of patients with COVID on the front line of the pandemic. What's happened since then, though, is just with the redeployment of nurses in some areas to working with COVID patients, with the new restrictions in long-term care and in hospitals, which have taken away like family members from the bedside. We've just seen more and more nurses. They haven't been allowed to take holidays. They have holiday freezes. There's been increasing regulations on nursing work at the same time as we're asking nurses to do more. And at this point, and nurses' as we know, nurses' wages have been frozen at below, a raise that's below inflation. So effectively receiving less money over the course of the pandemic instead of more because of Bill 124. So what I'm seeing now, like in the last, say, 6 months to a year, is nurses who are just burnt out, frustrated, who need a break. That there's this idea of like healthcare heroes has run its course. So these are nurses saying, I'm not actually a superhero. I'm a human being. I love my job and I want to do my job, but I also need to rest and recoup, and they're not able to do that. So now I'm seeing nurses that are just in every field. This is now across all nursing because we have shortages everywhere, that are just burnt out, and in fact, nurses are leaving the profession.
And before we move back onto the campaign topic, the one thing I have to ask you pertaining to this, because obviously you're a registered nurse, of course. So what is your take on like having to have the vaccine to, of course, do your job? Because a lot of the nurses, they worked so hard for so long, and then the vaccine mandate came in, and a lot of them got fired or let go.
There were I think a vocal minority. I think most nurses were happy that in fact, I think most of the nurses that I knew, like 99.9%, were really grateful to have first access to the vaccine as frontline workers. Were there waiting in lines to get it as soon as they could. We're really happy for that technology that was going to give them and their patients and their families greater protection against this illness that they'd really seen cause a lot of hardship. So I think nurses have really mixed feelings on this subject, because on one hand, we're really pro-vaccine. Like, we know that vaccines are this public health, nothing short of a miracle that really allow us to live more healthy lives than if we didn't have them, not just for COVID, but for, a myriad of illnesses that are now almost eradicated. And on the other hand, there is a reason why health information is usually private and why you don't disclose your health information to your, employer, and why we have those sorts of human rights that allow us to make private health decisions. And having that turned into a very public piece of knowledge is, there's a tricky human rights piece there that remains uncomfortable no matter how pro-vaccine you are. Does that make sense?
It definitely does, actually.
Yeah.
Thank you for actually explaining that.
Yeah.
But also, as well, I actually heard that you are actually dedicated to actually building affordable living and vibrant communities within Ontario. I was wondering if you can actually tell our listeners a bit more about that, and of course, what is your plan to make that happen when? And I say when because honestly, I think you're an amazing candidate, and I really do hope you win. So when you do win, how are you going to make that happen for Leeds and Grenville and Thousand Islands region?
Yeah, thank you. So the green, this is one area where I really love the green platform. I think it's visionary. So I'm just going to explain the platform, which is to have 15-minute communities. So this is this idea that we're going to freeze urban boundaries where they are. We're going to have no more of those sprawling, soul-crushing, urban communities that are just, or suburban communities that just, where you pave over farmland on the outside of a municipality, and then you just build a bunch of $1 million houses that all look the same, and the people who live there have to commute to big box stores to do all their shopping, or commute to work, and basically live that sort of carbon-heavy, but also like mental health poor life. So the idea is freeze urban boundaries where they are. We can build all of the houses we need to build. We're dedicated to building 1.5 million new homes within current urban boundaries if we do what's called infill development. So we get rid of the red tape for all the people who want to turn their, one family home into a multi-unit or like a triplex or a fourplex or whatever. We make it easy if you want to build a second house on your property and then use it as a rental or a granny suite or sell it, that you can do that. So there's all of these ways, if we're creative, that we can build a variety of types of houses, laneway houses, tiny houses, right in our communities that are affordable. Then we want to really, put our energy into main streets and small businesses so that people have access to all of the services that they need within their community. We want to bolster the sort of community hubs that already exist, so that all of the places, the community gardens, the community services that are already there to work with our elders, to work with our youth, to make sure that they remain available to people. And part of that is community schools. When kids go to a school that they have to get bused to for an hour, they don't feel that connection to their community. They don't grow into healthy citizens that understand the issues in their community. So community schools are part of that. So just really having these places to live where we feel connected to other people. That's great for our mental health, where we have green space, where everybody has access to rec, and where we have affordable homes, and at the same time we're not paving over farmland.
And I got to say as well, it's a phenomenal that you guys are actually pledging and trying your hardest to make that happen. In my area, I've grown up and lived in the Brockville, Ontario area my entire life, and it's sad to see my community get so much homelessness and so many stores closing down. It's almost like turning into the complete opposite of what I remember my community.
Yeah, that's so. My heart, that really tugs on my heartstrings when I hear that, because I see that everywhere, and I feel like we end up with a sense of inevitableness when we see more houses springing up that are like outside of most people's price range, and then when we see like beside those houses, we see like the big Walmarts and Costco's, just these box stores, for miles and miles, where even in the same plaza you have to drive around like a maze of parking lots to get to the new chain store. And it's not inevitable. There's nothing inevitable about it. It's about whether we create, it's about government, and it's about governing. It's about creating policies that allow that favor the little guy in the little stores versus making policies that favor the big guy and big bucks and big industry. That's what we're committed to doing.
And of course, when this election comes to an end, and when you do win, I know we spoke about, improving our healthcare system, and of course we just spoke about the vibrant communities and affordable living, but what other changes are you guys actually planning on doing for our community, for Leeds and Grenville and the Thousand Islands region?
Yeah, so there's a lot. So we have a vision, right? And that vision, and this is what I really think makes the Green Party different from other parties. It's a vision that extends into the future. It's a vision of where we want to be in 7 generations. And then when we look ahead at that, then we back up to right now and say, what do we have to do right now to get there? And that vision is, vibrant, connected communities with nobody left behind, making sure that we don't have people in our communities who are, disabled, that are living below the poverty line. So, for example, we're going to double ODSP, but and there's all sorts of other parts of our platform that encourage accessibility in all areas. So like all houses being built with universal design so that they're appropriate for aging in place. You know, thinking of everybody as a member of the community that has access to the services that they need. And so I think sort of what I was getting at here is that it's holding that vision in mind. We're going to start working out the pieces of our platform, right? So affordable, accessible communities, improving healthcare, you know, changing wages for PSWs and ECE so that we're pulling people into those industries and filling those badly needed jobs. Another piece in this works for, I'm thinking specifically of the college because I work there right now in Brockville, so it is Brockville-centric, is making sure that we're funding sustainable industries, so we're planning to give $60,000 in free tuition, or no, 60,000 students free tuition who want to enter the sustainable trades. Also another big issue in Buffalo right now, and you were even sort of mentioning this, is the fact that there's this tent city. So thinking about that, that's really, to me, that's an indicator that we've failed those people because often for more than one reason. So the first reason that people are homeless is because they don't have a place to live. So we have a lack of affordable housing. We know that in Brockville. But then there's often other services that are lacking as well that have brought people to the place where they're living in a tent city. So really making sure that we're solving all of those pieces in a proactive way. And to bring that back to the vision, really, I think when we're going through those steps, we're working with communities and going through those steps in the platform one by one to try to go towards our vision. We're going to learn as we go, right? Because we want to keep the dialogue open with all of the people who have expertise in these areas, so that we're keeping on not just sort of like bulldozing our way forward, but sensitively moving forward in conversation with municipalities, in conversation with voters, in conversation with experts, you know, from Brockville, telling us what Brockville needs, so that we're really filling the needs of the community.
And also, when you actually brought up Tent City a few moments ago, I actually saw a post on Facebook today that they actually, the OPP, were there actually tearing everything down. I have to ask, as an individual that really wants to make a change, what is your take on that, them actually tearing down those tents? Because I do know, in a way, it is kind of an eyesore, but that's the only form of living that these individuals currently have.
Yeah. I'll tell you, someone mentioned that to me just an hour or so ago, that they had heard about that. So I hadn't confirmed it yet, but I had to say my heart sank when I heard that, and also when I heard some of the chatter around the way that people were talking about the individuals as if they were the problem, when clearly the real problem is the failure of the system to meet people's needs, to bring them to a place where tent city is their best option, right? So I do think you can't just be like, oh, people are going to live in tents. That's fine. We'll just go along with that. But there's no problem here. Like, there is a problem, but the problem isn't the people who are living there. The problem is the lack of services. So that's how I look at that.
And of course, in just a few days, the election is actually going to be happening on June 2nd. I have to ask, where can our listeners that are in the local community, where can we actually go and vote? And of course, how can we vote if we haven't already done so?
Okay, so there's two places. You can vote any time at the returning office. So right now, so that is down, if you're on Parkdale, I'm trying to remember the name of the street, but you basically turn towards if you're heading from the highway to the water, it's like the first street on your right, and it's way back in an industrial area, but you can vote there anytime. So you can go and vote there right now if you want, and while you're on Parkdale, there's big yellow signs that say election, election, election. Then for all of the polling stations in Brockville, I actually don't have them all in the top of my head, so I apologize. But if you go on the Election Ontario website, you just put in your postal code, and then that's actually the best way, because it'll tell you the ones that's closest to you.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, people that are listening, if you haven't already voted and you want to turn off this interview to go vote for Fiona, then we're definitely not going to complain.
Yes, please vote. Absolutely. So I'm just gonna give you a couple of stats here, which is that, you know, we think of the PCs as having a real majority in our area, but actually it's only about 1/3 of voters that vote, or 1/3 of constituents that voted for Steve Clark in the last election. But the reason he was able to get a majority is because of low voter turnout. So if we want to turn the tide and you don't usually vote, then it's really important that you vote this election. That's where our power is. It's in getting people who have been, felt like voting wasn't for them, or their voice didn't matter, or, for whatever reason they weren't going out there to vote, just get out there to vote. That's how we make a change.
And of course, before we actually part ways this afternoon, I have to ask, how can our listeners in the local community find you on social media? That way they can follow you and the rest of your campaign trail.
Yeah, please. So I'm on Twitter at Fiona A. Jager. And then I also have a Facebook page where I'm Fiona Jager, GPO candidate.
And I got to say, first and foremost, Fiona, thank you so much for just giving us a bit of your time here this afternoon and sliding into our radio station Airwaves and just sharing your campaign trail and everything you got going on. I really do hope that you win, because we really do need a change in our local area. But I definitely will be rooting for you come June 2nd. Thank you so much, and I know you don't need it, but definitely good luck.
Thank you. I really appreciate you giving me the time, and just for being engaged, and for everyone else who's listening and is just engaging in politics and in democracy. Thank you so much.
You are most certainly welcome. Have yourself a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.